Hi, this is Jeff, and this is another episode of Deskies. And on this episode of Deskies, there's going to be a special episode, video game themed, OG versus NG. And for this episode, this theme, we're going to be taking an older video game and comparing it to its more modern counterpart. I can't talk. The point is, on this episode, we're doing a Justice League theme. So our OG game is going to be Justice League Task Force for the Sega Genesis system versus Injustice Gods Among Us, which is for most of the next-gen consoles. They have PlayStation 3, 4, Xbox 360, all those good systems. Basically, the games are essentially the same. They're fighting games. Justice League Task Force for the Genesis was basically a Mortal Kombat game with Justice League characters in it. And Injustice Gods Among Us, basically the same thing. Now, it's hard to really judge these because I try not, in this situation, I can't really compare graphics because it's not really fair to look, because the next generation systems are always going to win. Because obviously they have better graphics, unless you're a game like Minecraft, then you can get the fuck out of here. But most games are not Minecraft, thank God, thank God. Most games actually have decent graphics. So, I'm going to be comparing these based on how fun they are and how playable they are. Now, this copy I have of Justice League Task Force, first of all, it took me freaking forever to get the game to play. I bought it used, and I did finally get to play, but my god, was it a chore. Now, that's not the game's fault. That's just, it sucks being on an old system. Now, I did get it to play, and it sucked as far as gameplay. It was hard to beat anyone, basically, and unless you're playing two-player with somebody, the video game seemed to win a lot. Now, granted, I did not play it a very long time, and I did not play it a long time partially because I was very frustrated with the gameplay. Very, very, very frustrated with the gameplay to the point I wanted to punch my TV. And that's not like me. So, let's move on to its counterpart, Injustice Gods Among Us. It was pretty freaking fun. I mean, the gameplay was pretty easy. I didn't really have a problem. The computer won sometimes. I won sometimes. When I played two-player with somebody, they usually won, but it wasn't necessarily because they had any better advantages. It's just they were a better player. They were a better button masher, so to speak. And I won my fair share of games as well, so it wasn't impossible. Justice League Task Force for the Genesis, it didn't seem like it mattered what character you picked. They all seemed to play essentially the same, with maybe one or two special moves, which were not that easy to get. I don't know if maybe it was me sucking at the game, me not playing it long out of pure frustration, but Injustice Gods Among Us, now, I'm not a huge gamer, so I button mash. But at least with the button mashing on Injustice Gods Among Us, I was able to get some cool moves in. Now, Injustice Gods Among Us, again, has some unfair advantages for it. For instance, it has a lot of interesting skin alternatives that they really can't do on older systems. So, it's not really fair to look at me and diminish Justice League Task Force on that front. I like the fact that they had the CW Arrow outfit and Injustice Gods Among Us. either as a download or if you had the Game of the Year edition, it came with it. Same with the Man of Steel outfits. I like that. I thought it was kind of cool being able to see, the Henry Cavill Superman battling the Stephen Amell Arrow. That was cool. I like that. So, as far as the superheroes, though, really, for its time, for the graphics, Justice League Task Force, really, the characters looked like the characters. They were pretty cool. They looked like their comic book counterpart. They had Superman with a mullet. I'll give it credit for that. It was a very brave time for DC. I don't know why they went with Green Arrow over Green Lantern in the video game. I thought that was an unusual choice. I think around that time they had, maybe it was around the time of Parallax. I think it might have been, but still it seems odd because they were kind of pushing Kyle Rayner. And I know you could say Green Lantern might be hard to do with constructs, but you could keep the constructs simple. It can't be, you could just make him basically shoot an arrow. I don't understand why they went with Green Arrow over Green Lantern in that game. Now, Injustice Gods Among Us has a huge roster of both heroes and villains. Again, I can't fault the Genesis game here for that. It was a Genesis. They can only have a certain roster, and for its time, it actually had a fairly good roster as far as size. It was comparable to Mortal Kombat, so on that front, they're about equal. Injustice Gods Among Us, their roster made more sense, though. I will give that as a drawback. They have the important Justice League members in this game, even without the skins. And I know they do have Green Arrow in it, but I have a feeling they would have went with Green Lantern over Green Arrow. So I gotta kind of give it to them. From a playability standpoint, aside from it being difficult, at least Justice League Task Force, I would say that it's, I don't know, I can't even really say. I would say maybe it's more kid-friendly than Injustice Gods Among Us. Not to say that Injustice is a horrible game for kids, but that would be basically the only positives I can give it over that. They're both two-player games, so you can play two-player. In fact, this game, and I can't fault it, because essentially it's still a two-player game, this one. But you can network and actually have more than two players. But that's not the problem with the Genesis. Ultimately, the games, as far as the concept, as far as the roster, are fairly comparable to each other for the time. What gives Injustice Gods Among Us the edge is it's more playable. It doesn't seem as difficult, which ultimately makes it more fun. Someone like me, who's not a vast gamer, can come in, play it, not get as frustrated with the game, and it still can be difficult. There's still plenty of times I lost in Injustice Gods Among Us, but it didn't feel like it was as frustrating as Justice League Task Force. And so, ultimately, this battle of retro versus modern has the edge, even taking out all of its advantages and stripping it to its core. Playability dominates this game. So, we have a winner on this game, this special edition episode. That's Injustice Gods Among Us. Now, I'm curious for future episodes, because I'm not a huge gamer now, and I grew up with the Sega Genesis, and it still has a special place in my heart. So, we'll see in future episodes how well modern games compare with retro games. So, we'll see how that does. So, for now, take care, and thank you.